All right, welcome back to the vlog here at Gate City Casino. Gonna get involved in their 1-3 match the stack game. Game runs pretty big. Oftentimes it's Saturday night around 7 p.m. So I'm excited. Let's get into it. As you guys can probably tell from the thumbnail, this game played very big. In particular, this stack to my left the whole night, Jordan, very nice guy, had over $6,000 for most of it. We start with only 800, I say only, that's over 200 big blinds in this game, and let's get right into it. For our first playable hand of the night, we have Ace-Queen offsuit in the hijack. The low jack is going to limp. We're of course going to be ISOing the limper with his hand as strong as Ace-Queen. We choose a size of $30. Live poker sizes, of course, much larger than theoretical ones. The low jack is going to call, so we're heads up to a flop with $60 in the middle, which is pretty much a big brick. It comes 6-5 deuce rainbow. He checks it on over to me. In hindsight, I like a 1/3 pot bet for $20, but as played, I check it back. When the one-liner to a 3 comes out with the 4 of diamonds and he checks over to us, I think we just have enough showdown value here, so we check it back. Repeat 6, we snap check back the river, and we are good against Ace-10 of hearts. Not sure if we could have gotten some value on the flop there. I think we should at least try for a 1/3 size c-bet. Regardless, I'm glad I didn't try and turn Ace-Queen into a bluff. I think our hand is just a little bit too good for that. Nevertheless, we win our first pot of the night. The next hour or so, we run very card dead. It looks a lot like this. Fold, fold, fold. I can't even find hands to defend the big blind with. It's almost an hour and a half before we're ready to V-pip another hand. This time we find ourselves in the low jack. There's a $5 straddle on playing 1-3-5. We're going to raise it up 5x to 25, fairly large in the low jack here, with pocket 8s. It folds around to the straddle. Who's going to be the only person to call? We're going to go heads up in position to a flop. A note on the straddle, he had the largest stack at the table, so if we could flop a set, we might be in business. However, this dealer hates us. He puts out King 10-9. We completely whiff. Straddle checks on over to us. We're going to be betting with a lot of our range, therefore we're going to use a small size. We go for $20, slightly larger than the 1/3 pot size that the solver uses in theory. We go for around 40%. Sometimes the super small size will increase bluffing frequencies, which is something I'm not so interested in. I'm also not super interested in the repeat King of Spades on the turn. At this point, all of our EV with pocket 8s comes from showdown, so we check it back. We see the Jack of Spades on the river. The straddler checks it over to us once again, and I actually took a while with this decision. I considered turning pocket 8s here into a bluff, blocking hands like 7-8 and Queen 8. You can see in theory we actually have the best combo to turn into a bluff with our suits, but all other combos are just pure checking back. We show down the pocket 8s, and we're happy we did because the straddler has the nut straight Queen 8 offsuit. He's technically supposed to fold that on the flop, but you certainly don't run up a 10k stack by folding. For this next hand, we have a real hand, pocket jacks. This is the best hand I've seen in probably the last 14.5 hours of poker I've played across multiple sessions, so pretty excited. There's a button straddle on for $5. Both the blinds have limped. We're going to be putting in the ISO raise up to $35, hoping to get it heads up with one of the blinds in position. But our isolation raise might work out too well in this case because the button folds, the small blind thinks about it before folding, and the big blind snap folds, so we take down the $15 pre-flop. Nice to pick up some money. If I do that 40 more times, this will be a pretty good session. Hopefully we can get something going. Alright, unfortunately, my phone was dying at this point, so I had to charge it for about 45 minutes. Don't worry, we only got involved in one particularly interesting hand, which is this one. We find ourselves in the small blind with ace-4 of clubs. There is a new player at the table in the low jack. It's about his first orbit. He's going to open it up to $15. It folds around to us in the small blind, playing 3-better fold from the small blind typically, and this suited wheel ace region, ace-4, ace-5, ace-3 even, kind of falls well into our 3-bet bluff category, so I decided to go for it. I make it $65 to go. Big blind folds, and the villain thinks about it for a while before deciding on call. So we're heads up, out of position, in a pot that's over $130. The flop comes out Jack 9-6. There's not a lot going for us, just the backdoor club draw. We're going to be doing a lot of checking out of position. The only problem with that is checking doesn't give us the opportunity to win the pot now. And with ace-4 of clubs, I'm kind of fine bet folding my equity here. I don't think that we necessarily even have a lot of equity. So I think stabbing this flop for a small size is fine. If we get raised, we're more than happy to just muck this one. So that's what I decided to do. I bet $30. It's slightly less than 1/4 pot, so very small c-bet size. And the low jack villain is of course going to call. So we're going heads up to a turn. I'm planning on barreling all club turns and mostly shutting down otherwise, but I didn't really have a great plan for the ace of hearts on the turn. Our hand now goes from no showdown value to some if he has a hand like tens, king jack, queens, or kings, even though those might get 4-bet off at some frequency. I was unsure in game and mostly wanted to check and evaluate the low jack's action to probably continue barreling when we pick up our showdown value. He decides to bet for $85. It's a less than half pot size. I don't think we can do anything but call here, but this particular bet doesn't signify a lot of strength from the low jack, so I think we might have the best hand. We put in the $85, and the river is the 10 of spades. We have less than a pot size bet left. I considered block betting this river to try and get crying calls from pocket queens or pocket kings that didn't 4-bet, but I think the 10 of spades is a particularly bad card to do this on. We're now losing to tens, jacks, nines, of course better aces, and I don't think that lower pairs like 8s or 7s that ambitiously decided to stab the turn will feel inclined to call this block bet. I think they'll just fold. So I don't think there's really a merit in blocking. The most obvious draw, 7-8, did get there on the river. This is something I kind of missed in game. Nevertheless, we check it over and the low jack bets out for $150. It's less than half pot. It's really weird. If he had a value hand, why wouldn't he just shove? I thought about this one for quite a while, nearly 2 minutes. But ultimately, I decided we just have so many better hands to call, and I don't really want to be making a habit of calling river bets in these low stakes games, even though this is the biggest game in the room and it's playing humongous tonight. I just don't think people bluff enough on this river for me to consider bluff catching. We have a pure bluff catcher, and when players are under bluffing, our bluff catchers are more profitable as folds. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to muck my cards. We don't get a reveal, unfortunately, but after watching this player play for a couple more hours, I feel pretty good about making the laydown here. Our phone has enough charge for us to come back to the table and record, and we wake up with our favorite hand, Jack Queen offsuit. There's a button straddle on for $5. I'm going to raise it up to $20. Now this is far too loose. You should be playing extra tight with the button straddle on, especially first to act in the blinds. But we raise it up because we haven't played a hand in over an hour. It's our favorite hand, and we're pretty bad at poker. So the hijack calls and the button calls were 3 ways to a flop, which is 10-10-8 two-tone. I check it, as we're going to do with a lot of our range, out of position multi-way. Hijack checks and the button bets for $15. Now we made a bad raise pre-flop, so let's also make a bad peel on the flop. I guess this isn't so terrible with 2 overs, the gut shot, and the bet being so small, but the hijack calls as well, and we see the ace of clubs on the turn, brings in a second flush draw. We're now double gutted. We check again, the hijack checks, and the button snap checks back. When we make a pair on the river with the jack of spades, we feel pretty good about our hand strength. I think the button is capped here to 1 pair hands at best, but probably has a lot of draws. I would expect the hijack to raise trips on the flop often, so I think he's also fairly capped to try and eke out some value with a bet of $25, targeting 8x. The hijack pretty much snap calls. We turn over the best hand in poker, and it's actually not the best hand this time, as the hijack has slow played trips. Credit to him for checking such a strong hand on the flop, but now it's time to go back to what we do best, which is being card dead and folding a lot. We just couldn't really pick anything up for almost another full hour. Just super boring, sitting here watching a good game go on while we're card dead. We even have hands as bad as 5 deuce. If you like this hand, you should probably quit poker. But a pretty boring hour and a half of just folding. But you know what's not boring? Is playing on Club GG. We have bomb pots, cash games, tournaments, hold'em, PLO, everything you could ask for. The action is super good, like in this hand, where we have a 3-way 5-bet pot all in with ace queen, queen 10, and jacks. You can see here, runouts are not rigged, jacks hold for once. There's a ton of value to be had here. We have free roll tournaments, deposit bonuses, referral bonuses. As you can see here, the tables are always full. We have a variety of stakes, from micro stakes to mid, high stakes. You can play from anywhere on your phone or on your computer. If you want to get involved, DM at JQ Poker on Instagram. Shameless plug over, back to the cards. back to the poker room and back to the ATM. There are certain players that I want to be able to cover, so I add on for $700 to get the stack over the $1,000 mark. We're now in for $1,500. The game is one where if I could run a little bit pure and make some value hands, I could probably double up. Let's hope that happens. Our next hand is a double board, no limit hold'em bomb pot. We have Big Lick in the under the gun position. We're gonna flop bottom 2 pair on the bottom board, pretty much just stone nothing on the top. So we're gonna check it, and it quickly checks all the way around. The turn on the top board is a queen and a 3 on the bottom. It checks over to us. We're gonna take a stab for $50. The pot's already pretty big. We feel fairly confident on the bottom board. I guess we're getting scooped by a hand like pocket 3s and getting free rolled by like king, queen of clubs or something like that. But other than that, I feel fairly confident. Middle position player calls next to act, which is fairly strong. And then the big blind is also going to call. So we're 3 ways to a river, which come a 3 of spades and a queen of hearts. We now get scooped by pocket queens, but pocket 3s is now impossible. The big blind checks. I'm going to check it to the middle position player to maybe let him bluff some missed heart or club draws. I'm not really sure if that's even a thing in double board bomb pots, bluffing with air on the river multi-way, but he sticks out a bet of $250. I pretty much snap call. He lets us know that he has a queen, so we're going to chop this up. Honestly, surprised that the middle position player didn't have a stronger hand, but credit to him. I'd seen him play fairly aggressively in these bomb pots, which is why I checked the river and snapped him off pretty much. Chop is definitely best case scenario for our hand, so happy that the big blind called the turn so we can get a little extra money in there. It's nice to see a decent sized pot coming our way. This next hand is, in my opinion, the most interesting one we play tonight. I have Jack 3 of hearts in the $5 straddle. The small blind is going to limp the straddle, as is the big blind. I exercise my option to check. Kind of caps our range, but I think Jack 3 suited just too good to ISO as a bluff. So we're 3 ways to a flop, which is 10, 10, 5. Both the blinds check it over to me, and I go for a small bet of $5. This is a third of the pot, going to be sizing 1/3 with most of my bets in multi-way pots. Mostly representing 10x, seeing if we can take the pot down. The small blind folds. The big blind thinks for a while before flicking in what looks like a reluctant call. When he checks to me, I decide to go for another small bet of $15, attempting to cap his range, as 10x should probably be raising when so many draws come in on the turn. But he pretty much snap calls. When he calls so quickly, I think he may have a small pair that's attempting to bluff catch, or maybe he picked up a backdoor flush draw. Either way, I don't think he'll like facing a large bet, so I decided to pot it for $55. This line of small bet, attempting to cap your opponent's range and then blasting the river can be very effective, as players tend to raise off their strong hands on draw-heavy turns. So I would expect this player to raise a lot of his 10x on the turns when the backdoor comes in. He's thinking for a while, but apparently it's not about bluff catching, as he raises to $450. Pretty sad that we only have Jack high here and can't really do anything about it, because I just think that this raise is so full of it. I really think he raises the strong portion of his range on the turn. I think he's pretty capped at King X here. And with his strongest King X probably raising pre-flop, it's just really hard for me to find a value hand. I can't really do anything about it because I only have Jack high, but I think he's just left with a lot of air here, so pretty sad that we just have to fold. He would tell me later that he bluffed me with a better Jack high, so if that's true, credit to him, he's a wizard. Part of me doesn't believe him, but part of me wants to, because I think we capped his range fairly well with our line. Let me know in the comments what you think he had, and let's move on. This next hand is a perfect example of what was happening almost all night. I opened $25 on the button with 10-9 off, attempting to steal the blinds, and we get promptly 3-bet by the small blind to 110. He's nice enough to show us he had ace-king of diamonds, so just kind of running in to top a range tonight, not really quite sure what to do. For this next hand, the $5 straddle is on, and we are in middle position with pocket 8s. We raised it up to $25. It's going to fold around to the blinds. The small blind's going to call, and the straddle is also going to call as he says this. Already a wide range from the straddle, probably even wider when he says that. So when the flop is queen 10-3 monochrome and it checks over to me, I'm going to put out a 1/3 C bet. This is the size I'm going to use on monochrome boards with all of my betting range. Both of them are going to quickly fold. We take it down. Let's go. You can see here the dealer doesn't want to give me the pot at first, so I verbally berate her until she hands it over. I throw her $5 chip as an apology, and we move on. For this next hand, we've put the $5 straddle on, the cutoff button, and both the blinds have limped. We check our option with Queen 3 suited. Very similar thought process to the Jack 3 suited hand, but this time we flop pretty good on King 5-3 with 2 clubs. We have bottom pair and a flush draw. We're ahead of other flush draws, and against a hand like King X, we're going to have a boatload of equity. So we bet $10 into 25. The cutoff calls, everyone else gets out of the way. We're heads up to a turn, which brings in even more draws. It's the 8 of diamonds. On such a draw-heavy board, we can bet very large to charge draws and put hands like King X with a weak kicker in an uncomfortable position. So we bet out for $50, and the cutoff doesn't think for very long before putting in the call. I think when he calls the turn so quickly, it weights him more towards draws. So with this information, I decide to check the river, hopefully let him bluff a hand like Miss Clubs or Miss Diamonds. But he pretty quickly checks it back. We turn over Queen 3, and unfortunately he has one of those King X with a weak kicker hands. Perhaps we should have barreled on the river. I'm not sure if it would have worked, but in game I thought our hand was strong enough to show down. It is not, and this pot gets pushed the other direction. For this next hand, we get our camera set up a little bit late. There's a $5 straddle on. We've raised to $25 first to act with 6-5 of clubs. A little note on the straddle, he's new to the table. This is his first orbit, and he's gonna 3-bet us to $90. We're about $1,000 effective, and he has his girlfriend sitting behind him, so it's a little bit strange. She's kind of sweating the action. He seemed like an active player. He asked about the straddle and put it on unprompted. So players like these typically can be capable of some wider 3-bets. We call and we see a flop of Ace 7-3. In theory, we're supposed to be starting a bet for a large size because there are a lot of good barrel cards on the turn for us. Instead, I check back and we see the 8 of clubs. We now have an open-ended straight flush draw. The straddle is done checking, however. He bets out for 125 into 180. Pretty large size. I don't think raising makes sense here as we won't have enough left on the river if we miss. Solver tends to agree that this is a pure call in theory. We stick in the money. We have almost half the deck is outs, but the 8 of diamonds is not one of them. We completely brick. Now in theory we should just be mucking our hand. Obviously we never win at showdown. I think this is probably the worst hand we ever arrived to the river with, but the solver chooses not to turn this one into a bluff. I mentioned earlier, however, that the straddle has his girlfriend sitting behind him, and he probably doesn't want to get stacked the his first orbit. Let's break it down and see so if I decide to go for it, a announcing that I'm good bluff. Let's first check what the solver does. If you look at this range that the solver arrives to the river with, we're actually not turning many, if any, hands into bluffs. Most of the hands that are raising this size, quads, full houses, or trips with some of the strongest 2 pairs, like ace-king. The solver does throw in slivers of bluffs with suited wheel aces. When we make this play, we're targeting hands like ace-queen, ace-jack, and ace-10 to fold. Perhaps if he also has a thin value hand like kings through 9s that are betting this size. This should also always work if he has a hand like 9-10 suited that he's turning into a bluff. So I do find it a bit weird that the solver isn't turning bottom of range into a bluff here. If check 2 on the river, the solver will start to bluff our hand, but facing some aggressive actions, the solver plays very passive here. Perhaps a little too passive for my liking. I think this half pot size typically isn't indicative of a lot of strength. A lot of players will just get greedy with their good hands and bet for pot, but I don't think he's super strong with this size. So if we break down the math for how much fold equity we need for this to be profitable, the equation for fold equity, which is the share of the pot we can win by getting our opponent to fold, is expressed by the probability they fold times the equity they have against our hand. In this case, they have 100% equity. We could never win this hand to showdown, so our fold equity is just going to be equal to the probability that we can get him to fold. Now our minimum required fold frequency is equal to the size of our bet divided by the size of the pot after we bet. In this case, we're risking $835 to win a pot that would be $1465, meaning that he needs to fold 57% of the time for this to be a profitable bluff, and that is quite a lot. Folding around 3/5 of the time, probably a lot to ask from low stakes players, but let's take a look at his range and see how much of that we think we can get to fold. So if we jump into Hold'em resource calculator here and take a look at what his range might look like, I think on the river he's going to have 3 distinct categories of hands: bluffs, thin value, and thick value. Starting with his bluffs, I think an obvious one is here with 10-9 suited. I'm not sure if he always is going to 3-bet this preflop, but I think as played he always bluffs 10-9 suited when he does have it, so we can give him half the combos there. Another hand that makes sense to bluff is our hand, 5-6 suited. With only 3 combos of those left, it makes it less likely. So let's say, with this being a pretty speculative 3-bet preflop, and for us blocking one of the combos, let's say he only has 1 of the 3 available combos, so that's going to be 3 bluffs. If we look at thick value, I would say he probably always is playing quads this way. And then a hand like 7s for a full house, probably not always 3-bet, probably not always checked on the flop, so we can give him 1 of the remaining 3 combos of those. If he does have pocket aces, that is probably one of your better slow plays on the flop, so we can give him 2 out of the 3 remaining combos of those. Some other thick value hands he might have include hands like ace-king and ace-queen suited. So we won't give him every single combo because I think people like to barrel those on the flop when they make a pair. The same can be said for the offsuit varieties, so let's give him half of those. Moving on to some of his thin value, I think he could have pocket kings through jacks played this way. Probably not all the time, so we'll give him half of the combos available of those. The same can be said for 10s and 9s. I do just think that these are bet off on 2 streets slightly less frequently, so we'll give him slightly less combos. These low suited wheel aces like ace-4 and ace-5 suited are nice bluffs to find pre-flop, but it is fairly common for players to check when they make top pair with these hands because of their kicker issues. So since there's an ace on the board, let's give him 2 out of the 3 remaining combos for these. And then for hands like ace-jack and ace-10, I feel most comfortable giving him 1/3 of these available combos just because players aren't always 3-betting these and aren't always checking the flop when they hit top pair. So if we construct his range like this, could he have some bluffs like some suited Broadway combos? Sure, but I think for simplicity, this seems like a pretty accurate range as played. So if this is the range we're giving him, he has 48 combos in this range, 3 airball bluffs with 10-9 suited and 6-5 suited, 20 combos of thick value, 2 of pocket aces, 1 of pocket 8s, 2 from pocket 7s, and then 2 each from ace-king and ace-queen suited, and 6 each from ace-king off and ace-queen off. Again, not at full frequency with some of these hands because of their tendency to bet the flop when making top pair. And then if we start to look at his thin value hands, we've given him 3 combos each of kings, queens, and jacks, and 2 combos of 10s and 9s, as well as 2 combos each of ace-5 and ace-4 suited. When you sum this up, 9 from the strong underpairs, 4 from the middling underpairs, and 4 from the suited aces with weak kickers. That is a total of 17 combos. Then the weaker Broadway aces, 1 combo each of ace-jack and ace-10 suited, again because they're not always 3-bet pre-flop and not always checked on the flop, and 3 combos of the offsuit varieties. That's a total of 25 combos. So to summarize, we have a range of 48 hands, 3 of which are bluffs that are always folding when we reshove, 20 of which are thick value hands that are probably never folding, just some brick walls that we're running into when we try to bluff here. They'll always call, and 25 hands that are thin value that we think we can get to fold. Most of them, maybe not all of them. Let's do a deep dive and see. From earlier, we know we need to have him fold 57% of the time for a break-even call, preferably more if we're looking to make money on this bluff. 57% of 48 is around 27, so we need him to fold 28 combos for this to be a profitable bluff. Of those 48, we already said he's not folding his 20 thick value combos. So right there, if we take away his thick value combos, we have 28 combos in bluffs and thin value. We need him to fold all of those for this to be a profitable bluff. And I think there could be a case that that's mostly true. Of course, he's folding these suited connector bluffs. He's probably folding these middling pairs. Sometimes players just side call with kings or queens, but he seems pretty good. So I think he's always folding these, probably always folding his aces with no kickers. But is he always folding ace-jack? Is he always folding ace-10? I'm not so sure, and it only takes 1 combo for him to call with ace-jack or ace-10 to make our bluff unprofitable and just burning money. So I think it's pretty close, but I think general tendencies are when spots are close, live players at these stakes overcall, and so when players are overcalling, We don't want to be over bluffing. I think turning our 5-6 suited into a bluff is a little bit ambitious here. So after looking at it in depth, it's kind of close, but I think we should just obey our robot overlords and just fold. In game, I felt like it was kind of close, and like I said, his girlfriend was watching. And who wants to get stacked in front of your girlfriend? The counter to that, though, is who wants to get bluffed in front of their girlfriend. For sure not this guy. He snaps me quicker than I've ever been snapped before. He has ace-king, one of those thick value hands we didn't think we could get to fold. There might not be a more demoralizing feeling in poker when you bluff shove and get snap called. Credit to him for checking the flop. Maybe his girlfriend is a poker pro and he was using her for RTA. Nevertheless, our stack goes from 4 figures to 0 figures in less than 2 minutes. It's a pretty impressive magic trick I've been working on. I'm getting pretty good at it. With that, it's time to call it a night. Short-ish session. It's about 11. Play for 4 hours. In for 1,500. Out for $0.00. Just kind of a frustrating one. Pretty card dead for most of the session. And then I don't know. Just I get in these spots where like I know what theory says, and then I guess I just try and do too much. Like I just thought like I had a read on a guy who sat down. It's his first orbit. He literally bought it into the game. He just throws his rattle on. Like I think he's an action second guy. Hand playing. His girlfriend's watching. He was maybe like an orbit. He looks nervous. So I'm like, well, this guy doesn't want to get stacked in front of his girl first hand. So shipped it and he snapped me. Actually, I don't think I've ever been called faster in my life than that man called me with ace king. So credit to him for checking it back. Fun table, huge. Absolutely huge. Definitely the biggest game really in terms of hands. Couldn't run well. I've ever played in. Over 20,000 on the table easily. Just a punt at the end, probably. Definitely according to theory. There's a couple spots where I deviated. Just pure folding from theory. It's just so. I'll show it. But it's so frustrating because, like, you know, I've been studying a lot recently. Haven't had a lot of time to play. I keep getting in spots that I've seen before, and I know what the solver output is, and like I know what the optimal play is. I just try and use a read, or I try and feel out the moment or something. I don't know. Maybe you should just be more robotic, because definitely not going well when I'm trying to use live reads or game flow or things like that. Thank you again for your support. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. I'm happy to get back to you in the comment section. And until next time, good luck at the tables.